6 people slaughtered with a mattock on a snowy farmstead in rural Bavaria. A family murdered in the dead of night, the youngest just 2 years old. But the story doesn't begin with blood, it begins with footsteps. The year was 1922. The farm was called Hinterkaifeck, a lonely stretch of land tucked deep in the German countryside. For weeks before the murders, strange things were happening. Footprints in the snow leading to the house, but none leading back out. Keys gone missing. Newspapers showing up that no one in the household subscribed to. And most disturbing of all, sounds from the attic, as if someone was already inside waiting. What happened next remains one of Germany's most brutal and most baffling unsolved crimes. A case so strange, so dark, that even a century later, no one has found its bottom. This is the Midnight Mystery Archive. Tonight, we return to a cold and silent farmhouse in the woods, a murder that may have begun long before the first drop of blood. Hinterkaifeck wasn't a real village. Not exactly. It was the name locals gave to a small homestead between the Bavarian towns of Kaifeck and Gruber, about 70 kilometers north of Munich. Isolated, cold, quiet. The family who lived there was known to keep to themselves. Andreas Gruber, 63, a hard man, bitter and domineering. Kazelia Gruber, 72, his wife quiet and devout. Their daughter, Victoria Gabriel, 35, recently widowed, returned home with her 2 children. Kazelia, age 7, Joseph, age 2, and finally the new maid, Maria Baumgartner, hired the day of the murders. The family's reputation was complicated. Andreas was widely disliked, said to be abusive and cruel. Victoria was rumored to be involved in an incestuous relationship with her father, something that had once landed them both in jail. The Gruber family was not trusted, and after the murders, no one could forget them. Strange things began to happen weeks before the crime. Andreas noticed footprints in the snow leading toward the farm, but none leading away. House keys disappeared. A newspaper appeared in the home, one no one subscribed to. They began hearing footsteps in the attic, but when Andreas searched it, no one was there. The family's previous maid had quit, claiming the house was haunted, that she heard voices and felt watched. And yet, despite all of this, the Grubers stayed. Maybe because of fear, maybe because of pride. March 31, 1922. A blizzard had blanketed the area in snow. That morning, the new maid, Maria Baumgartner, arrived. She had barely unpacked her things when night fell. Later that evening, sometime between 9 and 11 p.m., the killer struck. Authorities believe each member was lured, one by one, into the barn where they were struck in the head with a pickaxe-like tool, possibly a mattock. One, then another, until 4 were dead. Victoria, her daughter, Andreas, his wife. The killer then moved into the house, where he murdered Maria the maid in her room, and finally, Joseph, the 2-year-old, in his crib. But perhaps the most disturbing detail wasn't the violence. It was what came next. The killer stayed. The killer fed the livestock. The killer ate meals. A neighbor saw smoke rising from the chimney in the days following the murders. It would be 4 days before anyone checked the house, and by then, the killer was gone. 6 people bludgeoned to death in their own home. No robbery, no escape route, just silence. And whoever did it lived among them for 4 days. On April 4, 1922, 4 days after the murders, the townsfolk of Gruber began to worry. The Gruber family hadn't been seen. Victoria missed church. Young Kazelia hadn't been at school. And from the road, the farm looked wrong. A local repairman arrived first. He was scheduled to fix a machine on the property. No one greeted him. The animals were restless. And then he noticed something strange. The barn door, slightly ajar. He stepped inside, and what he found would haunt the village forever. 4 bodies stacked and partially buried in straw. Andreas, Kazelia Sr., Victoria, Kazelia Jr., all killed with a blunt, heavy tool, their faces bruised and mangled, blood soaked deep into the barn floor. Inside the house, they found 2 more bodies. Maria the maid, murdered in her room. Joseph the toddler, killed in his crib. The house was otherwise untouched. Meals had been eaten. Animals had been fed. And someone had even milked the cows. Police from Munich arrived. But this was rural Bavaria. The crime scene was quickly compromised. Curious neighbors had already wandered through the house. A crowd gathered, stepping over evidence, touching things. Even police officers mishandled key pieces of the scene. In total, more than 50 people entered the property before a proper investigation even began. No weapon was found at first, but weeks later, investigators discovered a pick-like tool hidden in the attic rafters, the same place Andreas claimed to hear footsteps just days before. It was bloodied, worn, hand sharpened. The killer had lived above them, watching and waiting. Several theories emerged, some based in logic, others soaked in superstition, that the killer was a local, familiar with the family and the farm, that Victoria's rumored incestuous relationship had provoked someone, perhaps her late husband's family, that Joseph wasn't really Andreas's grandson, and someone had come to punish Victoria for shame, that it was a robbery, though no valuables were missing. One theory suggested a former suitor of Victoria, enraged by rejection, had just snapped. Another pointed to multiple killers, because how else could so many people be lured into the barn one by one without raising alarm? The autopsies revealed a deeply unsettling truth. Young Kazelia, just 7 years old, had survived the initial blow. She was found with tufts of her own hair torn out, likely from fear or pain. She had lain beside the bodies of her mother and grandparents for hours, possibly even a day, before dying. She died slowly, alone, and in the dark. Who could commit such violence and then stay in the home of their victims for days? Who could slaughter a child and feed the animals before disappearing into the woods? The investigators believed the answer was simple. The killer had to be someone local, someone who knew the layout of the farm, someone who knew the family's habits, someone who was trusted. Lorenz Schlittenbauer was the first man to arrive at the scene. He was the one who found the bodies, but he was also something more. He was Victoria's former lover. He may have believed that he was Joseph's father, and he had once attempted to marry Victoria, only to be rejected. He claimed he wanted to raise Joseph, but when Andreas refused to give permission, the relationship soured. Some say that when Lawrence arrived at the crime scene, he showed strangely specific knowledge. He moved the bodies in the barn before police arrived. He walked through the house with unusual ease, even unlocking doors no one else had keys for. Years later, locals would whisper that Lawrence knew too much and that the guilt never left him. Some claimed he confessed on his deathbed, but no official record of a confession was ever made. Other suspects included a revolving door of drifters and ex-soldiers. One man, Carl Gabriel, was believed to have died in World War I, but some insisted he faked his death and returned to murder his unfaithful wife, Victoria. Another theory focused on a group of thieves or vagrants passing through and drawn to the isolated farm. And then there were those who believed the killer had lived in the attic for weeks, slowly descending into madness. But none of these theories ever led to an arrest. In the 1950s, long after the case had gone cold, a woman in Germany came forward. She claimed her brother had confessed to the murders on his deathbed. She gave police a name and details that were eerily specific. But by then, the brother was long dead. And with him, perhaps the truth. What disturbed investigators most wasn't just the brutality, it was the aftermath. The killer stayed in the home. He had made meals, slept in the family's beds, and cared for the animals as if he had replaced the head of the household. Some believe he wasn't just hiding, he was inhabiting their lives. This wasn't a robbery. This was personal, calculated, and cold. The farmhouse was eventually demolished. Too many people claimed it was cursed. Too many visitors reported strange voices, cold spots, and a feeling of being watched. But before the building was destroyed, a team of investigators searched every inch. In the attic, they found evidence someone had lived there. A makeshift bed of hay, food scraps, and a cracked lantern. He'd been there, above them, and listening. The Hinterkaifeck murders happened over a century ago, but time did not bury them. If anything, It made them harder to escape. Despite dozens of interviews, re-examinations, and even modern forensic reviews, no one has ever been arrested for the murders. The case remains one of Germany's most infamous unsolved crimes. There was no clear motive, no confession that stuck, no evidence strong enough to close the door. Police have admitted if we had just responded sooner, we might have caught him. But now it's just a ghost story. Hinterkaifeck farm stood empty for a time. Locals avoided it. Children whispered about it. Some swore they heard voices inside. Others claimed to see a shadow in the attic window. Eventually, it was torn down. But even as the building disappeared, the legend did not. The site today is marked only by a memorial cross and a plaque. Visitors still come, some to pay respects, others to see if the land itself remembers. Over the years, the Hinterkaifeck case has been studied by criminologists, folklorists, and true crime fanatics. Books have been written, films produced, forums still abuzz with speculation. It has everything that grips us: a remote setting, a family with secrets, supernatural undertones, and a killer who seemed to vanish into the woods. But behind the drama is a deeper fear that the world isn't safe, that even your own home can turn against you. One final theory continues to haunt those who study the case, not because it's the most logical, but because it's the most terrifying. Some believe the killer never left the area, that he may have blended back into village life, a man who smiled in the streets, passed by on a Sunday walk, and nodded in church. He may have sat beside the grieving. He may have helped search for the missing. He may have told stories about the murders he committed. Today, all that remains is open land and silence, but the story lives in the soil, in the farmhouse that once stood, in the attic where someone watched and waited. The house is gone, the body's buried, but the mystery endures. Hinterkaifeck is more than a murder story. It's a warning that evil doesn't always come with a face. Sometimes it waits in the attic. Sometimes it lives in silence. This is the Midnight Mystery Archive, and tonight we have walked through a doorway that can never fully close. The story of Hinterkaifeck and those murders is not just unsolved, it's unfinished. You've just heard another journey into the shadows from the Midnight Mystery Archive, where the past whispers and the unknown waits in silence. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your shows. You can also listen and watch on YouTube, where each case comes with visuals that bring the mystery to life. New episodes drop Tuesday and Friday, bringing you deeper into the world's darkest, unsolved mysteries, forgotten crimes, and chilling disappearances. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your lights low. Some stories aren't over. They're just waiting to be found.